Hello and welcome, everybody, to another episode of Coaching from the Heart. We're back after a week off, so it's nice to be back with you. I am your host, Tyler Thurman, and joining me as always is my good friend, colleague, and co-host, Harold Feddersen. Hi, Harold.
Hi, Tyler.
Hey, Harold, it's great to be back with you again after a slight hiatus, and that was mostly due to my illness, but I'm good to go now. Okay, so the topic for our show today is the comfort of justification, and that might not make any sense to you at all. That's okay. We're going to dive into it in some detail. I'm not sure if it makes sense to me yet, but we're going to figure it out together. But before we do that, Harold, I just want to give folks a place where they can find both you and myself, because we are both professional transformative coaches. And if you're interested in working with Harold or myself on a deeper, more personal level, then here's how to find us and reach out to us. You can find me at www.coachtylerthurman.blogspot.com. And you'll find all sorts of contact info and free resources there. And Harold, how can everybody find you?
I can be found at www.haroldfeddersen.ca.
Fantastic. All right. So yeah, if you're watching the show and you're like, I want to talk to these guys some more, then that's how you do that. All right. So let's jump right into the topic for the day. This is kind of the verbiage for it is sort of my baby, if you will. Harold, he doesn't yet know what we're going to be talking about, but
I'm entering the mystery.
Yes, the great unknown. so, this is kind of almost a follow-up show to last week, or not? Sorry, 2 weeks ago, where we had a conversation about anger, I believe, and to me, well, let me first put some context around this justification thing. So I'm a student of the book A Course in Miracles. It's my daily spiritual practice, and there's a line. Actually, it says it multiple times throughout the text and the workbook, I believe, that anger is never justified. Now, you could insert pretty much any word to replace anger, right? It could be upset, it could be resentment, it could be victimhood, or victim mentality. It could be, it could just be any kind of, it could be stress, any kind of internal experience of life that is not what you want. At least that's the direction we're going to be pointing in today. And so what does that mean? Anger is never justified. Upset is never justified. Justification is, it's kind of a mental energy of finger pointing, if you will. It's it really is. It goes back to a theme that Harold, you and I have talked about again and again and again on the show, which is the victim-victimizer relationship. And so what we do is we get upset about life, about things other people say, things other people do, the weather, traffic, right? Unforeseen circumstances, foreseen circumstances. We can get upset about pretty much anything. We could get stressed, we can get angry, we can get depressed. And all of those emotions, all of those internal experiences, those are fine. Those are human. Those are, you're good to go with those. Those are there's nothing inherently wrong or bad or anything with those. All human beings experience those. But what we do with them is we get upset, and then we justify the upset, or we justify the resentment, or we justify the anger. And we say, we're essentially saying, I am right to feel this way. Not just I'm okay, like this is okay, this feeling is okay, but I am right. But here's the thing, we live in the world of duality where right has to be paired with a wrong, right? So if I'm right, then the rest of the world is wrong, or the other person is wrong, or the circumstance is wrong. And there's nothing inherently bad about justifying our feelings either. But here's the thing, we get to keep them longer. When we sit in our justification, our rightness, our you did this to me, and therefore I will continue to resent you, or I'll continue to be angry, or whatever it is. And so it's really just a cause-effect relationship that it's worth understanding better, seeing more clearly, having some insights about, where we can begin to look within and just see, maybe I don't have to do that. Because I think I said something last week to the effect of, it's not the anger that feels good, it's the justification of the anger. That's what we really revel in. There's something about that is attractive to us, because it makes it not our responsibility, not our fault, how we're feeling, what we're experiencing. And so that while that's nice, it's, in my experience, it's not quite as nice as the peace and the love of God that is kind of blotted out by our sitting in justified upset. So Harold, I'd love for you just to put me straight, or talk to me about what you're thinking about this. I know sometimes we have some differences in linguistics. I'd love to hear your what you're hearing, what you're seeing for you.
Okay, yeah, I got a couple things. So one, just what you said right at the end there made me think justification is like the stick of juicy fruit, right, of our rightness. It's like it's the yumminess, it's the yummy flavor of our being right.
Right. And we can all relate to that, right? I think I'm pretty sure as human beings, everyone sort of knows what it is to stand in your, you know what, I am so right about this. And they are. So it doesn't always come with that flavor. Sometimes it is with that
Hostility.
very strong anger, very strong hostility. That's right. But there is always that sort of, oh yeah. Right. Yeah, I like that. What you said, the juicy fruit or the stick?
I don't know why juicy fruit. I don't even chew gum, but
Well,
the
it's
stick
kind
of, it's like a stick of juicy fruit, right? It's so yummy and flavorful. And
right. Right.
so the other thing that caught my interest is when you said, like the flavors are often for being the victim, like you did this to me, and it made me think of it's also the victimizer. You know, um, you think of I think of, for some reason, parenting is coming to mind when you get sort of put in your place, and it's justified by, I'm the adult, I know better, or you just need to learn, or whatever the thing is. There's some form of justification, but it can go either way, because the victimizer is always justified within themselves for their behavior and their actions.
Right.
as well
Right.
as the victim, that's the flavor of feeling victimized. There's a flavor of justification in that as well. Like both
Right.
parties have their own form of justification in that interaction. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's the same thing. It's sort of the two sides of the same coin, if you will. It's because I think a lot of time people who are sort of um, if you're physically victimizing somebody, um, oftentimes they don't necessarily experience themselves as the victimizer. Usually they feel like victims themselves. I'm victim. They did this to me, therefore they deserve this to be done to them, or something like that, right? Tit for tat, uh, or an eye for an eye, right? You know, as was it the Old Testament? That's not my expertise. So, uh, but but yeah, there's, but it always, in my experience, it comes back to that victim victimizer relationship, um, which is worth looking at and stepping off that uh, dynamic as best we can. Just because as we've talked about in the past, it doesn't really um, serve our higher self in any very helpful way. It certainly serves us to be more of a victim, right? And like I said, I was speaking to why that's so attractive and why that feels so good is because it's something to do with I didn't do it. Right? It's even if we're in our misery, in our upset, in our anger, in our devastation, um, to be able to say, it's on you, man. It's not like it has nothing to do with me. It's your fault. Even if it's God's fault, right? We sometimes would point the blame at God or the universe or um, whatever it is. There's something about being able to say that keeps us as victims, and our ego mind just soaks that up. It loves that, right? Because again, the ego to me is just the part of the mind that likes to be separate, individual. I think not too long ago, Harold, you and I, we talked about sort of unity and wholeness, and seeing the oneness or the sameness with all people and all things. And what being a victim does is the opposite, right? It walls us off. It creates clear boundaries. I'm here. I'm a victim. You're the victimizer. You're different from me. I'm better than you, or vice versa, right? You're better than me. Um, and it just creates these clear judgments and walls that, while certainly feed that desire, to be right, to be the victim, um, doesn't really do much for us on the whole, besides give us more of the same. Which, in fairness, is what's familiar to most of us, most people, most of the time. Um, so it can be a little scary, maybe, just being willing to look at uh, it not being true. In the sense that, like I sort of started the show with, one of those lines from A Course in Miracles: anger is never justified, or resentment is never justified. It's not saying justification is wrong or bad. It's just saying it's not justified. And so let me tell you what that means to me, because that can sound kind of harsh. All that means is, regardless of what happens to us in our life, we can't lose our essential self. There's part of us that is sort of untouched by life, all the dramas and the violence and the now we might not even know that part of ourselves exists, in fairness, but there is a part, in my experience, of every single person that can't be damaged. It's this beautiful, you could call it extension of God, or spirit. But there's something in us that remains intact. And so with that as the foundation, then if we look at sort of being victimized, right, being attacked, being something imposed on us, then from a spiritual perspective, this has nothing to do with physical. From a spiritual perspective, nothing has been perpetrated on us in that way, right? Because by definition, it can't have been if there's an untouchable part of us, right? That part, at the very least, that part has not been victimized. And the good news is, at least in my experience, that's the part we're all looking for anyways, that we want to have a deeper experience of that. Sometimes I call it love, peace of mind, connection, that unity, that wholeness. So stepping off of pulpit now, Harold. You can stop me anytime.
I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah.
One of the things I think, because what I get what you're saying. The sort of biggest, the greatest you that exists.
Right.
That's may not be accessible all the time for us. So when we're in the sort of the thick of life, when our pride has been attacked, or our character has been questioned, the sort of more thicker human aspect of our being.
Yeah.
I think that's really where the actual work comes in. That's where our actual growth, our
right.
spiritual growth, happens there on the front lines, so to speak. On the
Absolutely.
forefront, when we are questioned in some way, when we feel this desire to attack or respond, or
Oh yeah.
in some form to protect or hold this idea of ourselves.
Yeah.
That's sort of when that friction happens. That's our opportunity.
Right.
To
I love what you're saying. Sorry to jump in. I love what you're saying because I think this is a good place for me to just make a distinction that I'm not saying don't sit in your don't justify those feelings. Don't get that is the classroom, right? That is when we do it, when we're in it. That's where all, like you said, that's where all that learning and the work happens. That's the only place where we can actually look at it, right, and have it mean anything. Because it doesn't mean anything just talking. So I really appreciate you putting that in, because that is so important. I think that it's totally okay to keep doing what you're doing. All we're sort of saying is, let's look at it. It can be a gateway to that more essential self, in my experience, as an entry point, as a learning curve to begin to see just there's more going on than meets the eye. I think there's behind the scenes, right? There's a sleight of hand artist that's playing tricks on you a little bit.
the you that wants to the you that wants to attack or defend is the one that we question.
Right.
And another, Susan Campbell wrote a couple of books that I think we both maybe read years ago.
Yeah, the author's name sounds familiar, and on the tip of my tongue, I have a title, but it's not there.
Yeah, she usually writes about relationships, but what's coming to mind is she has one of her top, whatever it is, one of her 10 keys to communication is
Right.
going out the door and coming back in again. And I did this recently where I was in conversation with someone and a third person wanted to interject, and I was quick to stop that person because I was very intentionally doing something with the first person I was in conversation with, and this person that was coming in to try and save the person I was talking to, because they were uncomfortable with how this conversation was going, but the conversation was intentionally uncomfortable for the other person because I was trying to drive up something. Anyway, I won't get into it, but the point is, a couple hours later, I needed to actually go and speak with that person because they didn't know what I was up to there.
Right.
So it's that same opportunity. Sometimes we act out of justification, but we can always go back and say, hey, do you mind if I clarify something with you, or maybe we need to apologize or clean things up or something. But there's always that opportunity, to bring it back once we've created the space where we can look at what we're doing, to see, what is really going on. What was I really doing there? We always have that opportunity to go back and revisit, either within ourselves and just keep within ourselves, or with the other people that we're in dialogue with.
Absolutely. And if not, there's as Abraham Hicks used to say, or might still, there are endless ships coming in.
Yeah.
There will be plenty of opportunities to learn this. It's one of the major life lessons in my experience that will just keep showing up, because another place to look at it is argument, right? Whenever you find yourself in an argument, either with yourself or with another person, they're technically all with ourselves for the most part, but if you just kind of look at it, have you ever won an argument and just it doesn't, it feels a little bit good, but have you ever noticed the relationship doesn't get any better, right? If you're like, oh yeah, I came away, I won that, you don't feel any closer to that person. So Harold, I think you need to show everybody.
To drop the mic. Yeah. I think that's a great point, because what is it? I think it's the band Sleeping at Last. Beautiful, amazing. The story of that guy and that band is amazing, but I won't get into that. But he has a line in one of his songs that we seek to understand or we seek to control.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's a great way to just look at, at what is it that you're trying to create in the conversation with the person? Are you trying, like you just said, are you trying to create connection?
That's a beautiful distinction. Yeah.
Or are you trying to be right about it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's a real softness. Because when we want to win the conversation, we're in that hard mode, as though we're in battle, right? But when we're trying to understand, we're trying to make connection with someone, there's a real soft, open feeling, because you're really taking in the other person's ideas, whether they're like yours or different from yours.
Yeah, that's so true. So true. And in fact, I think it's sort of beautiful that we have this show as a conversation piece, right, between two people. Hopefully more of you out there, but I think sometimes that gets portrayed in our conversations, Harold. I know certainly personally, every once in a while we can get, uh, or I'll speak for myself, I can get justified in my where I'm coming from, right? And those conversations, they're just not as fun. They're not as, like you said, open and soft and dynamic. They're just two people standing in their rightness.
Hmm.
And you know what? I think I've mentioned it on this show before. The question that I often comes to my mind is, would you rather be at peace or would you rather be right? And that can be a tough question if this is the first time you're looking at this, right? And it's certainly tough in the moment, right, when you are justified in your rightness. But it stops me in my tracks more and more to where I just I want to let go of that because I know what goes with that, which is lack of connection, lack of peace within myself at the very least, right? I'm all amped up. I'm not at peace. you know, I'm right. And but that doesn't feel peaceful. That feels like conflict. Um, and so it's, at the very least, it's worth sinking back into our own well-being. Um, and that's always a good idea. Right? It just helps with everything. It helps with our clarity of mind, helps with our relationships. Um, and so that's why I really want to talk about justification today, because it's not that justification is bad, but it is that mental energy that keeps things hanging on, um, which is fine. But it's helpful to know that, in my experience. It's just, you know what? Me sitting in this in the way that I am um, is keeping it alive in me, right? There might still be something to address out there. I don't know. That depends on the situation. Um, but at the very least, it keeps the conflict alive in me. And then whenever we're in conflict, we can't be at peace. Those are mutually exclusive states, um, for the most part. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking yesterday as I was working. You and I are both doing some renovations,
Yes,
uh,
we are.
and I was working downstairs yesterday, and I was thinking to myself, what is the thing? How can we be more helpful to our viewership?
Hmm.
Because you've mentioned it a few times where you'll say something like, this might be the first time you're hearing this, and I was thinking, so what? So if it was me, if I was a listener, what would I need, right? And I think um, one of the
Hmm.
one of the things is the there's it seems like there's no space between someone saying something to us and us reacting.
Hmm.
Um, and I think what might be helpful is for just as a practice is to get into that space and see how much of a gap really exists in there. Because we often, it happens so fast, where
Yeah.
we snap into our feelings because of something someone says, right?
Right. Right.
And for me, anyway, probably the greatest. There are two tools that have been the most valuable for me. One is meditation, because meditation, as I practice it, is just a practice of being in the space of things as they are. Um, and then the other one is inquiry. So just being really curious about whatever it is. So I'll have a
Hmm.
situation, let's say, I'll have this thing happen. And then after the thing is done, I create lots of space and time where I inquire about that. What was really going on there? Not
Hmm.
what was the other person like, why are they trying to make me do this, or why are they trying to do the thing they're doing, and nothing about them, only about my own self.
Right, because we
You
could
know?
speculate for days on the other
Yeah,
person.
which is just really a way for us to quietly justify whatever it is we're doing.
Just a
Well, they're
little bit
doing
of
that
extra
because.
finger pointing going.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So one of the questions that I always is kind of an entrance into this, because it's layered, right? There's layers and layers, and one is, what is the truest thing I can see in this? And it takes a certain kind of listening and a certain form of courage to enter into that space with yourself. Like, you have to be. So there are two kinds of courage, right? There's masculine courage and feminine courage. And masculine courage is kind of like the rah rah, where you grab your sword and you go off and you chop people's heads off. And feminine courage is like this inner courageous willingness to enter an uncomfortable space, right? So for me, it's practicing sort of a more feminine courage, where I'm willing to actually look at how I'm reacting, or how I'm sort of the bigger story that I have running that has me believe that I need to be right, or I need to somehow keep doing whatever it is that I'm doing in the conversation that's not creating peace or connection between myself and the other person, or even just within myself.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think it's worth highlighting maybe some motivating factors, right? 'Cause, as far as we have to be willing to look at justification because it feels so good. You might be tempted not to, right? Because it feels so familiar, it feels so powerful sometimes.
Like the show title,
Even
it's comfortable.
though it's disempowering. It's in its very nature, just literally disempowering. Because to be a victim is to be disempowered, right? That could be a definition of being a victim. No, I'm not saying if you feel like you've been victimized that's wrong. Simply that it's worth looking at. Well, why would I look at this, Harold? Why would I have inquiry? Why would I want to develop that courage, that feminine courage, that inquiry, that openness for this? I think it's helpful to look at, the sort of destructiveness effect it can have in our lives, as well as the beauty of learning to let it go. Now, again, I want to make clear to say it's not bad. It's not wrong. It's not sinful. There's just some things that go with both of them, right? On the one hand, we get to feel justified. We get to have that experience, which feels nice. Feels, we all know what it feels to feel right, and on the right side of something, the correct side, and someone else is the wrong, and they're the perpetrator, and the feelings of seeming power that go with that. But it's worth knowing what you're missing out on too, which is a much more wonderful relationship with that person in the moment. Connection, a beautiful feeling inside yourself, right? To be at peace, to be in love, even, right? I don't know if I've experienced righteous justification and love at the same time. I don't think I've had that experience, Harold. If I have, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure those two don't go together. And so I think sometimes it's worth pointing people towards sufficient motivation towards even having this conversation, right? Why? why am I even going to engage in this? What these two guys are talking about, you know? And I just have to speak for myself. It's one of the most worthwhile conversations I've ever been in. Now I know different people put different language to it, um, but it's really a conversation about, like you kind of, like you said, Harold, sort of an inner dialogue that's running the show, kind of being more, uh, having a sneak peek backstage to that, knowing that's going on, knowing that happens all the time, um, and knowing myself, right? That you know, there's a part of me that loves this justification thing, but there's another part of me that is wants to be at peace. It wants to not obscure the connection that's already there between two people or many people. Um, so there's some beautiful things on offer. Wonderful relationships, peace of mind, and again, that's not to make any experience wrong. It's just worth looking at. You know, here's what's available. Yeah. So go ahead.
It always comes down to value.
Sure.
It always comes down to value. So it's just, what do we value more? You know, for me, for most of my adult life, I valued being right more than I valued connection. So
Yeah.
I would do whatever it took to justify my rightness instead of creating connection. Um, and then, you know, as I've gotten older, that has shifted, and now I'm more interested in the connection than the rightness. You know, I'm more
Right.
interested in listening to what you have to say, as opposed to talking down your throat or down your ear. Um,
Talking at you instead of
Talking
to
at you,
you.
yeah. Um, so that's part of it. You know, I think the show title too, you know, the word comfort,
Mm,
it cannot be understated just how comfortable it is to just be the way that we've always been.
right.
You know, especially when we're with people who we've been in a relationship for a long time. Parents are a good example. You know, there are sort of entrenched patterns of behavior and speech patterns and languaging that just exist. It's almost like you can be on autopilot with certain people in your life,
Right.
um, because of the sort of the long. It's like it's been this way for so long, right? And part of that is it's just comfortable. It's just easier to do. It's just easier to be this way. Um,
Right.
so in there, if we want it to just be that way, then we value the ease of it, so to speak. You know, but eventually, we're going to want to speak from a deeper truth. And when the value of the deeper truth gets strong enough, then there's a conflict between the comfort and this deeper way of being that doesn't have its own language or its own expression in relationship yet.
Right.
So there's a whole process, a whole practice that comes in that. So I think, you know, why should we do this? Is we should do whatever. Obviously, we're gonna do whatever we value most, no matter what. So one thing is to look at, how comfortable am I actually in the way this is going?
Right.
Um, you know, like you said, you're like, do I like that? You know, that inner conflict, and in which areas of my life do I really like that? Maybe I really like it at work, but I don't like it with my kids, or maybe I really like it with my kids, but not at work or wherever. And then begin, to enter the still waters that require us to paddle in order to move. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
that's
easier to stay
beautiful.
on the shore than it is to enter the waters and paddle.
Yeah, it is. You say comfort. I like that. I like the word familiar as well. It's just what we're used to. Um, and, we might not know anything else is available. Um, that's why we're here, right? No, but more than that, you have that in your own mind. That's that you don't need somebody like us to tell you that. Uh, but wherever you're at is perfect, right? If you're listening to this conversation and you're like, nope, not ready. You know what? Not ready to go there. Like I am a victim. I'm right. I want to continue to be right about. I've had that conversation with people, right? Like, not ready, not ready to be peaceful because I'm still valuing rightness too much, and that's okay. That is okay. Because, like you said, Harold, good portion of your life, right? Your adult life. Same goes for me, I'm sure. Um, and I don't know how that point gets reached, like, necessarily, right? Maybe you hear somebody like us say something and it just kind of clicks for you, maybe. But I don't really know how to manufacture that readiness to be in this conversation. So if you're not ready, you're not ready. That's okay. But if you do want to be in it and you want to open up to that inquiry, um, yeah, there's some nice still waters to be to be paddled through, as you said, Harold.
Another interesting thing that I think needs to be brought forward too is because we talk a lot about living in our heads, or at least I do, living in our head as opposed to living in our heart.
Mm,
And I think we all have the experience where, with a particular, let's say, a parent or a sibling, where we have uh, that comfortable, sort of predictable way that things are going to go. It's predictable and it's comfortable, but it's also false because, as
mm,
we talked, was it 2 or 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, whenever there was the thing, the Antonio Machado poem, Path Maker. There is no path. You make
right.
the path by walking, and by walking you make the path. And I went off
Sure.
on this big tangent about that one. Um, that really is how it is. Like when you are in the shared space with someone that you've known your whole life or most of your life, it is the first time that this sharing has ever um, been. So in order for those decades worth of comfort and predictable communication to enter the present, we do have to recreate them.
Sure.
Because right now, like, you and I have known each other for 5 years. Right now, we are on the threshold of a brand new conversation where neither of us
Sure.
knows what the other is about to say. Yeah.
Right. Right. Right.
And one of the ways to check in on that, for me anyway, is, am I up in my head or am I down in my body? Am I in my heart where
It's
things
great.
are,
Yeah.
open, or am I like, oh, right, I know how this is gonna go, and then my dad's gonna say this, and then I'm gonna say that, and then this is gonna happen, right? And if that's going on, then I know I'm up in my head.
Yeah. It's great feedback for where we're at
Hmm.
if we just check in with ourselves, and it's easy to tell, right? You know, if you just check in, oh, you know what? I'm really invested in being right now, or or not. Right? It's really just or not, because the rest will take care of itself. Harold, when you're saying that, an old psychology expression comes to mind. We seek the teeth that fit the wound.
Ooh, that's a neat one.
Have you ever heard that before?
No,
I,
I have never heard
I
that.
can't remember where I first heard it, but um, that's kind of when you were describing sort of our dynamics with family and old friends and that kind of thing. We're sort of doing a dance that we don't know it, but we've set it up to serve us in some way, right? Because we so want to. We don't. This is unconscious, right? We don't consciously say, you know what? Today I want to be heavily victimized, right? No. Nobody says that, right? But that is going on for pretty much everybody at some point in time, where we we relish it. It's so familiar, it's so our identity, right? Even though it's not true, we're so identified with that role that we have all these relationships in our life that serve beautifully to meet that quote unquote need that we sort of self-generated. So we are these beautiful spiritual beings, and we like to play the role of the injured gazelle, right? In need of rescue or whatever it is, but we don't know that we actually create the wound. Now, not physically, right? That's a different conversation. But the wound is our own upset, our own resentment that we're sitting justified in. That's the wound. But that's in our own mind. And we get to keep that, and we get to keep all those relationships working the way that we don't know it, but we want them to continue working. And so it's worth, you don't necessarily need to understand the ins and outs of that, but it's worth looking at and seeing, you know what? Maybe I'm not as much of a victim as I thought I was. Maybe my experience of upset or anger or pissed offness or righteous justification, maybe that bit is up to me on some level. Not on any level that most of us are consciously aware of, but you can become more aware of it. And then from that place, we actually get to have some kind of a say, some kind of a choice. Now, it doesn't always feel like, oh, like, do I want chocolate or vanilla? It's not like that. It's more like you find yourself in the upset. And then you see, oh, there's something about this I'm not seeing. Like, Harold, you said something, a beautiful question, something about the truth. What is true? I can't remember if you remember exactly what you said. Something about what's true here, or
like what's the truth in this?
What's the truth in this, or what am I not seeing that's true? Because I have learned, I didn't pop out of the womb knowing this or being able to have the capacity for this, but I have learned to know when I'm upset, to look again, to take a second look. So I've taught myself that is feedback about something about me. Now, most of us have taught ourselves it's feedback about something about the other person. Now, there might be something going on with them too, right? In fairness. But most of us haven't yet learned. I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. I'm far from it. Anybody who knows me can attest to that. But we get better, Harold. Like you said early in your life, wasn't really interested in this, wasn't so good at it. So there is sort of a learning curve that we're all, willingly participating in or not, I think.
Because one of the interesting things that happened, speaking about practice and changing, is as I practiced letting go of wanting to be right, it was very uncomfortable to sit in that space for a long time where
Yeah.
it was like, no, I was almost like,
I don't
I
want to
was,
let it go.
yeah, it's like, I have to be right in this. And so there's that's the discomfort of leaving that old pattern, right? And then as you
Right.
practice going out of that old pattern and then back into the old pattern, back out, out and back in, out and back in, over and over again, eventually you just, like you just said, with feelings, it's like, oh yeah, here I am again.
You
And then
develop
when
a
you're,
facility for it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and when you're in it, then you're like, it's not satisfying like it used to be,
Right. Right.
So
Because we're
then
not as
it gets,
identified with it.
yeah, because we practiced going outside and being something else. And then when we got that, when we have that, then we're willing to let it go, right?
Right.
To some degree. There's another point that I want to bring up, that because we're talking a lot about the beginning part of this process,
Sure.
but there's an
Sure.
interesting thing about the end part of this cycle. And I don't mean end cycle like you're going to go around and then, oh, I just mean for the whatever one aspect of your being that you're practicing this in,
You mean I'm not
is
going to vibrate off the planet, Harold?
you might. You
In my
might. I'm not.
spiritual enlightenment?
Don't let me limit you.
Okay. Very good. I'm sorry.
Um,
Go ahead.
there comes a point, like this. I loved the whole thing you just said. I'm going to go back and listen to that again. The whole thing about we seek the teeth that fit the wound. We get, because we create we create relationships that are either the teeth for our wound or the wound for our teeth. Yeah.
Yeah.
We unconsciously, like you said, it's not like we're like, hey, I need somebody
Yeah.
who wants to be told that I'm right all the time. So what happens is eventually, as those patterns shift, as my desire to be right continues to fall away and my desire for connection continues to grow, all of the people that I've created relationship with, that I have trained to be the wound for my teeth of rightness, so to speak.
Sure.
Things are going to happen for them, because all of a sudden I'm not the same in this relationship.
Right.
So
Because
it creates,
you were filling the role for them as well.
exactly, yeah.
Right. It was a
So
dance.
so you want to be aware of the potential shifting that happens in that. So, like, sometimes relationships actually just need to end because they're not serving either person anymore. But most often, if you're in conversation with the people you're in conversation with,
Yeah.
there will be a new dialogue that has to happen, where it's like, hey, I'm practicing being this more, and you may notice a shift. Because I remember the seat I was in a restaurant I was in. And I was having this conversation about how other people, like when you don't see people for a while, how other people hold us in our past. They
Sure.
continue to hold a past version of us alive, even when that person no longer exists.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I had this experience, I was upset, because I was like, hey, I'm not that person anymore. You can't make me that person. And I was upset. And then as it continued to happen, I started to soften about it. And I was like, this is so fascinating, because they are speaking to a former version of myself that no longer exists. And I remember the person I was
Nice.
talking to saying, yeah, this is ridiculous. Like, how do you fix them? How do you have them not talk to that past version? I said, this is how, first of all, you don't need to fix them at all. But it's your opportunity to embrace that former version, because my resistance to that person speaking to a former version of myself was that I didn't necessarily like that version of myself at that time. So the opportunity that exists when a person interacts with a former version of ourselves is for us to love that former version of ourselves, because we can't be who we are now without having been the person that we were.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
there's the when someone is speaking to the past version of ourselves, there's an opportunity for us to love that former version of ourselves. And this person said, well, how does the new version of you get to be seen by this person if they, because sometimes they just can't see it. But I said, really, it's just being the more truthful you now with that person. And they'll either see it or they don't. And that actually doesn't matter in one sense,
Right.
because it's just who you're being. Like, you just keep being who you are now. And if they keep holding the former version of you, then eventually that relationship just won't serve either of you.
Yeah.
Or they'll say, wow, something's different. Or
Because they might still really want and feel like they need, again, not obviously to them consciously, but to be in that victimizer role, and you don't fit the bill anymore.
yeah,
Right? And so that's okay. So I love that you brought that up, Harold, because it can be jarring, I think, to people to watch the old forms of their relationships change. Um, now, relationships never really end, because they're sort of a spiritual thing within us, but the forms change. Sometimes the physical form completely falls away, right? Like you said, we don't interact with that person anymore. Um, and that's pretty natural. I'm glad you brought that up, because you might be like, what the hell's happening here? Right? Like,
yeah.
like my old friends, I don't have my old friends anymore, right?
Or we
Or
just
my
don't
family
connect.
doesn't want
Or
anything to do with me, or suddenly my family loves being around me, and it's weird,
yeah.
right? Like, I don't know how to, be with these people in an intimate way. Um, and so, yeah, there's just a learning curve there. And if you're willing to be with it, it can be kind of fun. It doesn't have to be this devastating thing to watch these relationships fall away and other new ones come in. It's just what's going to happen naturally.
And it
Yeah.
is jarring the first time. Well, it was for me anyway.
Certainly
Jarring.
can be. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then we come back to that question, what is the truth in this? And then you can see, oh my goodness, I haven't seen this person in, 3 years. It's like, who are they actually talking to? Wow, who was I 3 years ago? Oh my goodness. You
and
know?
and that's not, it's not relevant for everybody, right? Because some of us are sitting in our 3-year-old self today,
Yeah.
almost exactly, right? Now there will be some shifts, um, but there doesn't have to be any big ones, right? Like, you can largely still identify with your ego self, um, and it's just kind of different. We're all in a different place with that, different points in time, um, and it's all okay. But as you wake up more and more to that part of you that loves peace and love and unity and connection and wholeness and lack of judgment, lack of justification, or just absence, you know, um, you're going to be less, uh, not, you're going to be less willing to participate in some of those old dynamics, not in some kind of like, I'm holier than thou. It's just not, it's just obvious to you. Oh, I'm not really interested in that. That's that you can even see it sometimes. You know what? That clearly used to serve me, and that maybe I needed that at the time, but I don't anymore, and I can let go of that, whether it be a relationship or even just an old story in your mind. You don't, and it's a beautiful change, beautiful shift. So Harold, I realize we're running up towards the end of the show here, so I want to as always, see if we can get a parting shot from you. Uh, so I know you love it. So
I don't know why I love it so much.
yeah.
So I think the parting shot for today is first of all, create some space in your life where you can enter the inquiry of your own comfort. Where you can say, what is it that's so comfortable about um, this or that in my life that isn't creating the peace that we want, but it is comfortable nonetheless. And just enter, breathe in the courage and sink into that, and just be really curious about what is the value in that.
Right.
Because if you're not experiencing the peace and the joy and sort of the beauty of life, then there is a structure happening, an emotional, psychological structure that is keeping you, as you said, a barrier. It's a barrier between you and
Right.
either the other, or you and the peace, as you like to say, the peace of God. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's a false, it's a false creation in a sense.
Nice. I like that. Yeah. False narrative. Maybe we'll
Hmm.
talk about that next week, Harold. Who knows?
Mm. Maybe we'll have another, because that one of the things that you and I both enjoy is when people send us some requests for topics.
Yeah. Yeah. We
'Cause
love. Yeah, because it's real and usually if you're asking it, somebody else probably is too. So,
mhm.
so thanks everybody for sending those in. Um, all right, Harold. It's been really fantastic show. I've enjoyed it. Just as a reminder, Harold and I, if you enjoyed this conversation and you want to go deeper with either of us, just reach out to us. We'll have a conversation with you. We're professional coaches. We work with people one-on-one and in small groups in a professional capacity to deepen their understanding of this kind of thing. so so if you're interested, reach out. You can find me at www.coachtylerthurman.blogspot.com. And you, Harold?
You can find me at www.haroldfeddersen.ca.
Fantastic. So thank you everybody for tuning in, and have a wonderful week with all the love in the world. We'll see you next time.